We've got a brand new subclass in this book as well. I'm very excited for it. It is Lunar Sorcery. We have a Lunar Sorcerer now. Much like most of the options for players in this book, you can kind of like grab here and grab there and adjust on the, like it's really cool. There's a lot of different abilities associated with what phase you are attempting.
Yeah, so this subclass is all about connecting your sorcery as a sorcerer to different phases of the moon. We wanted to explore this type of subclass in this book because of how influential the moons are in Krynn on how magic functions. And we especially wanted to delve into that theme with the sorcerer, because the sorcerer, of course, is the spellcaster whose magic is innate to them. Whether they were born with it or they were transformed at some point, however they came by their magic, it's a part of them. And we wanted to, in this subclass, really flesh out this notion of a person whose inner magic is being affected by phases of the moon. Now, early on in one of our internal drafts, we actually thought of tying it to what the phase of the moon is out there right now. That ends up limiting the character too much. So instead, in what people got to try out in Unearthed Arcana, and then what's also now here in the final book, the sorcerer, while originally influenced by the phases of the moon, now gets to decide what phase they're channeling. So even if there's not a full moon out, they are channeling the power of the full moon.
Thank you for that, because in previous editions I had to keep track of what phase the moon was in on Krynn. So, which, you know, I didn't mind, but yeah, that was somewhat time consuming.
and so the idea again is that the sorcerer's power was unlocked by the moons, but now that it's unlocked, the sorcerer has a certain amount of liberty in deciding which phase to tap into. We also needed to make sure that this subclass worked not just on the world of Krynn, but in other worlds as well. So that's kind of a fun balancing act for us. Anytime we create something for a particular setting, we want to make sure it feels natural there, that it's expressing the themes of that world, while also being usable on another world in the D&D multiverse. Not only because sometimes DMs and players want to loot things from one setting's products to use in another setting, but also because people travel in the multiverse. So we needed to make sure we have mechanics that still function if you pop through a portal and you're now on a different planet.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why you're not locked to the phases of the planet you're currently on. Because again, you might go for a trip and you might be in Avernus or someplace else in the outer planes. Your magic still needs to function.
What are some of the unique aspects to like the different phases you can find yourself
So each phase, as we saw in the feats for the Mages of High Sorcery, each phase sort of has a theme. And so you'll see that with the full moon, the brightest of the phases, it bolsters spells from the aberration and divination schools, schools that are about either illumination of the mind or protection. The new moon, where you can't actually see the moon, where you just see the night sky, that's necromancy and evocation, so magic that is about harm, and or sometimes not harm.
Right.
But those two schools tend to be about damage and death. And then there's the Crescent Moon, which is all about sort of transmutation, illusion, this sort of thing, playing with perception and form.
And that affects, as you go up in higher levels, that affects your abilities.
Yes, and also your current phase unlocks specific abilities at different levels. So as you go up through the subclass, if say when you're a 14th level member of this subclass and you're currently aligned with the Crescent Moon, you have resistance to necrotic and radiant damage, that kind of thing. So you not only get to bolster your spells, or rather your spell casting, by getting to cast certain spells more often when you're aligned with the phase that is connected to them, you also gain access to these different unique abilities based on your current phase.
Well, there's some good story hooks beyond being on Krynn itself. Like, I mean, people just love moons.
Yes.
So, like, we've obviously got entire obsession about moons since the dawn of time. What are some really good hooks for playing a lunar sorcerer?
I think first of all, there's the aesthetic hook. This is a chance if you've ever wanted to play the arcane spellcaster who is garbed in robes or other clothing covered with moons and stars. Well, here you go, because your magic is coming from these heavenly spheres above you, or if you're on another plane of existence, somewhere else in the cosmos,
right,
you're drawing your magic through yourself as a sorcerer. I think one thing to explore too, playing a member of this subclass, is does your character have a particular lunar phase that speaks to who they are? Even though you can change phases, each of these lunar sorcerers still, again, might have one that is the phase that feels like home. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be an interesting thing to explore, is your lunar sorcerer more aligned in terms of their personality and their aesthetic with the crescent moon, the new moon, the full moon. You might still draw on those other phases, but when you do, what does that feel like for your sorcerer? When you venture away from that place that feels like home for you, that I think could be an interesting thing to explore in terms of your character's personality, your character's look. Your magic also can look various ways. I often encourage people to reskin their magic, and so I would encourage anyone playing this sorcerer to imagine many, if not all of their spells having, sort of a moonlight cast to them.
Right.
That, as you cast, there might be, little crescent moons and full moons appearing spectrally around you. Lots of fun things you can do with just the look of your character and of your character's magic.